And I'm going to go ahead and start as we have a really good group of folks on this call. Welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Allison. I'm the director at Farmed Institution New England Fine, and I'm joined here today by our staff who will be playing various roles throughout this 1 hour event.
I just want you to
we are muting folks, but each of you have the ability to unmute yourself, and we have the ability to remute you. So just let you know that. The forum today, the focus is really how our farm to institution, our institutional dining operators and key supply chain partners responding in the wake of COVID-19. What are your big concerns? What are your strategies or solutions you see? And how can we all work together to address this and even out the flow for everyone in the food system, from the suppliers to the dining operators to the consumers. We're hoping that this is the first of a number of different initiatives that we collectively can do to help address these issues, and we'll be looking for your input and feedback on that as we go. The focus of today is really provide an opportunity for you all to share and talk. It looks like we have 82 people on at this point. So I think what we'll be doing at some point is breaking into breakout groups so that we have a smaller number of folks participating in each of those conversations, so you all have more of a chance to communicate. We will be taking notes. We are also recording this, and we'll be recording the chat box so that we'll be able to share that with you as well as others who weren't able to make this if they're interested. Just a few other housekeeping details. I mentioned the muting. You have the ability to mute yourself and unmute yourself. Please do use the chat box to put down your name and organization, the state you're connecting from or connecting to. Also use the chat box to ask questions, provide comments. You can see under the participant, if you put your cursor down at the bottom of the screen, you can see a list of participants. In there, there's also the feature where you can raise your hand, which will give us the opportunity to call on you if you want to talk. We won't be doing all the talking by any means. You can rename yourself next to your picture by clicking on the 3 dots at the top right-hand corner if the way that your name is showing up is not sufficient. And we will be doing light facilitation to start, sort of creating it as an open forum, but I think given the number of folks, we will sort of step into a more intentional facilitation, and we'll be making that as we go, and probably doing breakout rooms, coming back at the end to share a little bit about what's happening in some next steps. First, so what I'd like to do is have Hannah Layton from Fine staff, our research and evaluation manager, just share a spreadsheet that some of you have seen already and explain a little bit of what we're hoping it can be used to do. And we're also interested in taking some comments on that. And after that, we'll start to open it up to hear from you all. So thanks, Hannah.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We wanted to share, we've spent the last week talking to a lot of our partners and stakeholders and trying to determine how we can sort of shift our efforts and be as useful to the network as possible. And one of our focuses that has floated to the surface is that there's a need to do some matchmaking in all of our disrupted supply chains right now, whether it's matchmaking of food or trucking or storage or labor or technical assistance or something totally separate. We felt like, you know, we want to do as much of that as we can, and so we started this spreadsheet so that in addition to one-on-one support, we can also provide a place for people to either add in surpluses or add in needs that you may have in your farm to institution world. And we want to encourage as many people as possible to check in on this, to reach out to us if you're looking for labor, or you have additional food, or you have storage, and we can help set up those connections as well. But I'm sharing right now the food tab, and you can see we have a number of haves and one need right now. So if you are in a position where you're looking for food in your community, you can come here and look at who has identified a specific item and the quantity, and whether or not they can distribute it to you in your area. And so there's a column for item, quantity, price, if applicable, the facility. You can search by state, transportation, and all of the contact information. And once you've added something in and it's been allocated or reallocated, we're just asking that you change the status to at capacity, and hopefully this spreadsheet will kind of manage itself so that there aren't any missed opportunities. But we are monitoring it and looking at it daily to see if there are potential matches that we can help make. And we're really eager to hear how this is useful, if it could be more useful from all of you. So we welcome any feedback via email, or if you want to put it right in the chat function, or if anybody has any questions about this right now, I think that would be great.
Thanks, Hannah. And yeah, if there's any thoughts on the spreadsheet, suggestions, questions, feel free. Holly, we see you have a question. You want to speak it?
Sure. I felt like, you know me, Peter, I always have a question. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I was just wondering if we're also tracking why some of these farms might have, there's some pretty big numbers in there, the surplus. I think it would be interesting for us to just better understand if it's loss of an institutional market, a college university has closed, they were selling to school districts. I see some that have distributor partnerships. I'm just curious if they were with someone who is maybe delivering to the institutional market and not the retail market, so we can better understand where the breakdown is in the supply chain, perhaps. I don't know if that's a column yet in the spreadsheet, but that might be interesting to track as well, why folks are experiencing the surplus right now.
Great. We'll add that space for that. That makes a lot of sense. Question here, or comment from presumed Teresa at Salvation Farms, that another example of a B2B platform for food waste. Spoiler alert. So we'll take a look at that and see if there's some things we can learn, and others can see the link there. And Alexandra Lunt, you have a comment here. You want to share that with us?
Sure. My point was just that it might be more efficient to have that sheet be primarily just like what people have, so that the people who need food can go and look through it themselves, rather than someone then needing to match those people who need it, but the person who needs it can go and do that work for themselves. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding the logic behind the need function.
The idea is that if you are, let's say you're an institution that is staying open for a subset of the population, and your distributors are no longer able to deliver to you, and you're trying to find a certain amount of product that you could bring into your dining hall through an alternative distribution channel, then you could filter by need as opposed to have, or you would filter by have, you would search the haves for the products that you're potentially looking for.
Right. But is the idea then that the people that have things would also search by need to do some of the work themselves?
Yeah, ideally so, for sure.
Okay. So then maybe it is helpful for those people who put in a need to put in the quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think detail is useful in all these places. Richard from UMaine, I'd love for you to ask this question to the full group to start sort of transitioning. I mean, people can still ask questions or make comments on the spreadsheet. You can also do that by chat. And for those who've joined later, please put down your name and organization and the state you're connecting from in the chat box. But Richard, if you would pose that question to the group, I think it'd be interesting to hear what this group has to say in response. Make sure you're unmuted. Like, Richard, we're not hearing you, so I'm going to jump in and say it myself. This is Richard Brzezowski from UMaine. Says, with the majority of institutions shut down, what are the options for farmers whose sales were to these accounts? So curious what people are experiencing or working on in response to helping farmers find other markets.
I can start us off and just share some of what I've seen in my community personally. I'm based in upstate New York, the 7th honorary New England state, in a very rural community with a lot of farms and a lot of food growing, and a lot of dairy in particular. And as I'm sure, as you know, in a lot of communities, we're seeing this major disconnect where the grocery stores are out of products, and all of a sudden that's where most people are getting their food. And so there's no milk, there are no eggs, there's really limited protein in the grocery stores, there's no bread, and yet there's a lot of product that just isn't flowing into those markets that's existing in the area. And so we're seeing a lot of the support agencies like Cornell Cooperative Extension or other organizations that have a network of farmers using different platforms to put information about availability up on their websites so that consumers can search by specific items that they're looking for or farms in their neighborhood, and that hopefully there is an opportunity to connect people that might not otherwise purchase milk from other places other than the grocery store to find out about products that are in their own backyard right now. I've seen some other creative tech solutions that are popping up in that space as well.
Great. We have a few hands raised, I think, in response to this question. So Margaret from CSA and Lillian from Kentucky. We'll go in that order to start.
Okay, hi, this is Margaret Christie from CSA in Western Massachusetts, and I think Holly noted this in the chat, but we are seeing a lot of farms adding online ordering capacity and home delivery, both in clusters of farms offering a wide variety of products and individual farms. Our farm stores and farm stands are also generally doing pretty good business right now. I think for people who feel they'd rather go to a smaller place and go direct to farmers than go to supermarkets. So, you know, we have been very impressed with the really quick and innovative response from farmers, and you know, really glad that we've been able to jump in and help them figure out some of the technology and systems and that kind of stuff.
That's great.
I guess the one other thing I would add is we do have a page on our website that we're pushing out to consumers, you know, noting those changes, the new business entities or the businesses that have added new services so that people can find them.
Margaret, would you put your URL in the chat?
Yes.
Great. And Lillian, did you have a response to that?
Yes, thank you, that I don't know how to actually virtually raise my hand. So
there you go.
Similar, Hannah's laughing at me. Along those lines, we are working with our distributor that's just been absolutely walloped. They had recently acquired the food hub that we've been working with. So the food hub was absorbed by a distributor. They're bringing back online direct to consumer sales, but it's going to be a sort of MultiFarm CSA model where there's an aggregation point and then dispersed to different pickup spots, trying to repurpose our whole animal program. So moving whole animals in more consumer friendly boxes, or we've got a call, we're working on it actively. I think we can get it going next week, but trying to move the produce that way also, in conjunction with, and our State Department of Agriculture has been trying to coordinate and find, they've been an incredible resource and point of contact for moving surplus. What we heard from Kroger, so major grocery chains are saying that they have too much produce, that it's not being purchased, and they have a glut, which is, that's anecdotal, but it's what I heard secondhand. So that's kind of odd to me, and the bottlenecks that are happening in that supply chain, but yeah. And also the same, lots of move of individual farmers going to online sales.
Great. Thanks, Lillian. Steve Youngburns, you have a comment here about opening your wholesale portal to all area farms. Would you elaborate that on a little bit?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're a hub in the Twin Cities, and we use the platform Local Food Marketplace. During regular wholesale season, I manage the wholesale program. We make available products that our farmers that we work with have. We take orders, we ship them. Now we're considering making that available to anyone who has stuff right now, although we're in the upper Midwest and there's nothing fresh right now. It's all value added. But we would make that available, assuming this goes on for a while, and try to help farmers who have lost wholesale markets, which is primarily people who've been selling to restaurants.
All right. Anyone have a particular reaction to that? Because we also have a somewhat related question from Dana Hilfinger. Dana, do you want to ask your question about grocery delivery services?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering if anyone had any success with like latching on to existing grocery delivery services, or had any experience with that?
Hi, this is Jessica with the Greater Nashua Food Council. We have just recently started promoting the different grocery delivery services. So Walmart has them in our location, as well as Instacart. The app is available in our region, and then locally we have a taxi company that is offering to do grocery shopping and grocery delivery for people. And then we have our transit department who's offering grocery store trips.
Thank you. Christine, do you want to share your comment, your question?
Hear me? Did I unmute myself?
You're good now.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just curious how the folks who are switching from wholesale markets to retail or to dropping off at different sites so families can pick up, how is that affecting their revenue or their bottom line? Or are they doing this and without any real understanding of how it's going to affect them, and it's too soon to know? Or how is this going to help? Is this going to really bridge this gap so that they don't have to suffer financially or miss payments on loans or whatever? I'm just curious about the financial impact of making these switches and how quickly they can get the revenue in from a new market.
anyone have if you have a direct ability to respond to Christine's question, feel free to unmute yourself and do so.
Yeah, this is Margaret at CSA. I would say we do not know yet, and it's really a moving target. So even, I mean, we had one group of farms start up. I mean, they pulled something together, not this last weekend, but the weekend before, and we're doing deliveries last week. They had, I think, 80 deliveries last week. They had 500 this week. I think they're kind of constantly reevaluating how, like, their infrastructure, their systems, their what they're charging for delivery, and I think it is really a moving target. So even then we have another cluster that's launching this week. They're going to be opening for orders tomorrow, and so they had a little bit more time, not a lot, but a little bit for planning. But my guess is that, you know, the plans they put in place will be subject to all kinds of changes, like mostly everything else right now. So I don't think we know. I mean, I think our farm stores that were already in place and already aggregating, I know they're seeing, you know, a huge amount of turnover and needing to get orders in much more often. So I think for them, you know, they had a system that they were using, and the traffic has really bumped up, and that's one thing. But if you're creating a whole new system and adding a whole new factor of delivery, I think that is just really, we don't know the answer yet.
Yeah, this is Nessa from Rhode Island Food Policy Council, and we have a very similar situation to that, where we've had a group of farmers that pulled together and started selling together and sold out almost immediately. And now every time they open for additional orders, they sell out again very quickly. And then in addition to that, Farm Fresh's Market Mobile, which has been serving restaurants and institutions, switched over really quickly to making deliveries to residences, and already had a whole system and trucks in place, but still they're above their level of summer sales right now. So they're really being stretched. And they also removed a minimum order, I believe, or reduced whatever the minimum order was. So I think they don't know yet how that's going to affect their bottom line. They just decided this was what they needed to do, and are going to kind of figure out how to do it as they're doing it. Thanks, Nessa.
Julia Van Loon has had her hand up for a bit. So Julia, I want to give you a chance to comment, and then we'll continue working through the chat, and then the decision makers at Fine will decide whether we break into breakout groups for about 20 minutes with smaller groups of people talking to each other. We continue on this thread, but please keep the comments coming through chat. As I mentioned at the outset, we will be recording those, the chats, as well as the comments, and we'll be doing a lot of deciphering of what's come from this rich conversation here. But Julia, why don't you take it away?
Hi, I raised it a while ago. I probably forgot what I raised it about. It was logistics, I think. I'm a producer in New York State for K-12 schools, beef producer. I produce ground beef products, and I make hot dogs. And I have warehouses all throughout the state that are holding my bulk product, because it's food service, frozen, which is a good thing. But every day the shelf life diminishes. And we're trying to figure out how to repurpose what we have so that it can go into hands quickly. And supermarkets are a challenge. I'm in New York City, actually. It's where our office is. And it's a double-edged sword in a big city, because supermarkets not necessarily accustomed to local. They've steered from it. It's new for them. And freezer space. They don't have the real room to store bulk product in apartments. So wondering if there's opportunity for like meat lockers or processors who are willing to repurpose, to help repurpose to break down a 30-pound case into 5-pound bags that already, you know, and help remarket it in that way so that at least we can start feeding people and not stop forever. Sorry, that was a mouthful.
No, it's a really useful comment. I mean, I think it's applicable in some of the New England states as well. So if folks have a response there, feel free to jump in. We're also, as I say, tracking these questions, and that's a good challenge there. Margaret, thanks for putting your website up. Ken is asking, have we contacted the IGA network about the spreadsheet? We at Fine have not, but Ken, it sounds like that's a suggestion. Is there more you want to say about that in terms of how that might dovetail with their efforts?
Well, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
This is Kay. That was
Hey,
my comment. So, yeah, right when this happened, I was working on organizing a farm to grocery store event in Montana. And so right now my mind is really thinking about, okay, producers connecting with grocery stores, like who is that point person to discuss what the need is and how to bring that product there. I know that a lot of the more conventional, larger grocery store, those national chains, the regional, managers don't know much about actually making those relationships and making those purchases. A lot of it goes through corporate in Boise or what have you. So I'm just kind of thinking about, okay, there are some grocery stores where the managers have a bit more power and control to actually start making orders and start filling empty parts of shelves with local producers. And there are some grocery stores where, you know, they really aren't really ready or prepared to have that conversation and are waiting from directive from corporate. And so I'm just thinking about grocery stores as this big category that encompasses many different kinds of models and just how we can tap into that. So mentioning IGA, they've been a really helpful network for me with publicizing the farm to grocery store event. And so I just think that that would be like that's one, like the lowest hanging fruit, I would say, for like grocery stores and managers who would be able to make those direct communications. You know, they're not waiting for some order from corporate or anything. So I just sort of thought IGA would be the lowest hanging fruit there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there was a call yesterday of Vermont folks and Mark from Black River Produce commenting how distributors have specific markets, either the institution and restaurant supply chain or supermarkets, and one's, you know, really tapped out and the other one has a lot of surplus. So the extent to which there's starting to see a little bit of crossover is happening actually in some cases, but they're fairly distinct channels. So thinking about how that can be connected makes sense.
Hey, Peter, sorry, just in response to that, it looks like John Waite at Western Mass Food Processing Center, it looks like you're maybe going to sell through some retail grocery stores. Is there anything that you want to add to working with grocery stores? You might be on mute if you're speaking.
I unmuted you, John. If you're, oh no, I didn't. No.
JF Waite.
Hey, we can hear you now, John.
So the grocery stores is mostly our local independent grocery store and a food co-op, and the other where we're looking at some of these delivery services that Margaret, you know, had just talked about, that some of our farms and restaurants are trying to get food out to people too. So by putting the frozen vegetables in 1-pound bags, we can get it out that route.
John. So there's several comments, questions here related to the K through 12 sector in terms of what are people seeing in terms of the ability to the schools under these conditions to still use local food. And then a comment from Chloe Boutel, who says that you're trying to actually move away from fresh food out of labor concerns. So I'm just kind of curious, those of you who are in the K through 12 school food, what are you seeing in terms of any opportunity to continue to use local food or use more local food, or just pressure to really move away from that? in a need to get things packaged up and sent home. So it looks like somebody from Mass Farm to School, Simca, do you just have a specific example there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, one school district I was talking to, said labor wasn't so much the issue because at this point, her district has committed to continuing to pay the food service staff. But given the uncertainty of whether school districts that have fewer than 50% of students receiving free or reduced price meals actually getting full USDA reimbursement for that, I think there's inconsistency in whether districts are committing to support staff. So it seems to me more likely that it's less of an issue of like, is there a worker than is there a worker who you can pay because the district is committed to paying them regardless of how it all sort of winds up in terms of reimbursement.
Mm.
And by doing prepackaged stuff that requires less labor, you sort of hedge your bets. You need less labor to produce it. So if you're concerned about whether you're going to be able to sustain paying people, that is a way to quickly cut back on some of your labor needs.
Great. Bryce McKnight from Concord, see your comment here that you're saying a farm to school GPO is definitely needed. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I think we might need to unmute Bryce. Let me see if I can do that.
Okay.
You're unmuted now, Bryce.
Oh, he's unmuted, yeah. He may have stepped away. Bryce, if you're there, feel free to jump in. So we're seeing some other comments about things there. The chat's moving quickly. So Christine, you have a comment about advocacy to USDA. Do you want to amplify your comment there?
Well, only, can you hear me?
Yep.
Only to Simca's point that if it's really that the school systems are just concerned that they're not going to be reimbursed from the USDA, that seems like a really important thing to advocate with USDA to tell people, don't worry about that. You will get reimbursed. There's talk of trillions of dollars floating around in DC. And it's just an not that it necessarily is going to go that way, but it seems like a unified yell directed at DC, saying this is important in this moment to not diminish the quality of kids' school lunches or the food that the families are getting. That it could be the most important food that they get during this crisis. That it be healthy food because it would help the farmers, food producers, and the families.
Is Hannah suggesting if there's anyone from USDA on who'd care to comment on that? And I can't see yet from the list if there is. Yeah, open invitation.
Is that, Marion, is that you who just commented about Denver Public Schools? Do you want to share that?
Sure. Here in Denver, we passed an initiative last year where a small percentage of sales tax would go to providing meals for kids. And so we were able to provide $135,000 to Denver Public Schools. And they have, I think it's 8 or 9 different distribution sites where they are giving out breakfast and lunch bags, anybody that shows up. And then they're also providing food for families over the weekend. And Revolution Foods, who primarily works here with our summer food service program and child and adult care food program, is repurposing to provide these meals. I don't think that they're worrying about reimbursement at this point because they have received the funds from the city.
Bryce, I think you had a related comment, if it's still apropos here.
I think Bryce mentioned microphone.
Okay.
Oh, actually, no, sorry, that wasn't Bryce. That was John. Bryce, are you there?
Yeah, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Sorry. Thanks for trying.
It looks like Simca might have responded in the chat about waiver requests to the USDA. Do you want to share more about that, the status?
Yeah, so I know that our Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed has been aggressively pursuing waivers to USDA to be able to affirm that they'll have reimbursement for all districts that are offering meals, but they don't yet have a response, I think, from USDA. So what I've heard is that, you know, they hope they have some more information next week, but it is being pursued. I don't know what the state of that is in other New England or New York states.
Stacy, any comments from the New Hampshire side, or is that consistent with your understanding?
Yeah, that's consistent with what's happening in New Hampshire, that schools, the Department of Ed is working with all the schools to try to get waivers. So they have to have basically a plan in place of when they're going to distribute food and how they're going to distribute food, and that the food is still meets school or breakfast guidelines. So they're still a reimbursable meal that they're distributing. So I think the schools have to have that plan in place, and then they can go for the waiver. That's my understanding.
And Helen from Vermont, it seems like, is that a slight variation there, or what's your experience?
It sounds like it's pretty similar to what I've been hearing from New Hampshire, at least in Massachusetts. But yeah, I mean, I think we are having a difficult time with the schools that don't qualify for area eligibility. Those are the schools that don't meet 50% free and reduced. So they're just having a difficult time figuring out how best to serve their communities and getting the kids who really, you know, need the meals, but then it complicates their delivery routes and everything. So like pretty much every other state, they're hoping to be granted the area eligibility waiver, but there's no word yet if that's happening. And then the other thing I just want to lift up, I saw Emily just commented, Emily Gallivan, about the concern around school nutrition staff safety. That's another really big concern that's going around in Vermont, and I assume elsewhere as well. There's just a lot of folks in the risk population that work in school nutrition. So a lot of programs are really trying to balance that need to protect the safety of their workers. So not wanting to bring too many other people into the kitchens that aren't necessary, but then also wanting to keep them employed as long as it's safe to do so. So those are some things that we're hearing.
Great. And it looks like Kai is sharing a COVID food safety resource for K through 12 food service. Kai, thanks a lot for that. So this is a really rich conversation, and I appreciate you're all hanging in with the sort of jumping around, and not every comment is being fully channeled or answered, but we're hearing a lot of these issues rising up. Like
Peter,
to also,
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. I saw one response from Jessica Gorin about No Kid Hungry giving out extra funds. I wonder, Jessica, if you want to speak to that.
I can find the email that they sent out and send it to whoever I need to within your organization, and then it can be spread out. But basically, they want to make sure that all kids have meals, so they're offering more funding. Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare Foundation is also offering more funds in the New England area for emergency COVID response. So there's a bunch of organizations right now that are responding by offering more money. I found the No Kid Hungry one, so I'll send the link in the chat for anybody who wants it.
That's great. Thank you.
And John Tureen, who doesn't have a microphone, has commented that in Connecticut, a school that's not in a not eligible area can apply for summer food service program style service, which is easier and more flexible, and they actually get reimbursed at a higher rate than regular school lunch program. Is that consistent with people's understanding in other states, or is that a unique situation in Connecticut? Or is that something people would like to hear more about if it's not consistent in all the states?
I know there are schools in Massachusetts that are providing food under the summer food feeding program, but I don't know any details about reimbursement or why they chose that route versus another route.
Okay, and both Simca in Massachusetts and Helen in Vermont are saying it's not unique to Connecticut and that they're using that offering. Okay.
There's a question in the chat or a topic of interest on coordinating K-12 meal distribution with other anti-hunger efforts, food pantries, backpack programs, senior meals. I wonder, that came from Simca, I wonder if anybody wants to speak to examples they're seeing in their communities. Feel free to put it in the chat if you do.
Yeah, we'd also have heard a similar, at least idea proposed related to the colleges and their ability to pair up. I did put a question out to Hunger Free Vermont yesterday. I haven't heard back yet. They've been pretty swamped because they coordinate the anti-hunger groups in New England to see if there is any sort of coordinated conversation between school districts and anti-hunger groups or the college sector and anti-hunger groups in our region. So we'll certainly share that if there's more information that comes forward, or if it seems like an opportunity to create that kind of communication, we can work to see if we can establish that. There's some really rich conversation around the K-12 sector, and I'm wondering if there's folks from the campus sector or healthcare or corrections or other institutional sectors that are facing particular challenges that haven't been addressed or have seen some other strategies or solutions that they'd want to share. This is great. Well, this is a super long list.
In response to the last question about collaborating with other anti-hunger organizations, Steve Young Burns in Minneapolis is providing an example. Steve, do you want to share on the call?
Yeah, sure. The Sheridan story is not that old. They've been around for 5 years, I believe, and it started with K-12, elementary, actually, school teachers noticing kids hoarding food on Friday afternoons And so they have been giving kids grocery bags full of food to take home on weekends. They've taken in a lot of donations now and are doing more of a multi-day program, and they're accepting volunteers and donations of food, and also doing deliveries of food for families that they know are hungry. And I pasted the link in the chat. It's called the Sheridan Story.
Oh, great. Thank you, Steve. And it looks like in, is this the city as in New York City, or is this Denver? Is this Denver? Has twice a week calls with emergency food providers and developing a have needs list, similar to this one, with resources including cash volunteers, food distribution, and storage. That's a great. I'm wondering if there's a link affiliated with that we could add in.
Yeah, let me check out now.
Sorry, I think you were breaking up a little bit. A couple other broad topics I just wanted to put out there and see if there's any reaction to are any of you, I know in various states there's conversations going on, obviously with at the administration at the state level and the congressional delegation, and NSAC and others have put forward some opportunities for people to be advocating at the federal level for supporting farmers and smaller producers as part of any kind of stimulus package. Are there any specific advocacy requests that people want to make available to the group that folks can consider signing on to in support of policy or funding or waivers that haven't been discussed or that you think that we should all be aware of? Is sort of one question. Another broad question is just, are there other resources that are doing something similar to what we're doing here that we want to make sure we're dovetailing with? And some of you have put those in. We really appreciate that. We'll capture those. And one of the key issues always is anything else you're hearing from specific farmers who are been contracting with institutions, and if there's other thoughts on what they've been able to do. I know some of you already commented on that, but that's another one of our broad categories of questions. And then just one last one is, are there specific topics that people would like to see a more focused conversation on as a follow-up? I did see one comment that this has been helpful in having a follow-up conversation that was specifically focused on some of the farm to school issues is something that's come up. If there's other pressing issues that folks would like to see us have a conversation on, feel free to enter them into the chat or comment here.
Peter, two topics that are emerging are matching labor as institutions, as restaurant labor with the need for labor in other sectors as restaurants are closing, and what the challenges are and opportunities are for connecting labor across those different groups. And then the other is as the weather warms up and some of these ad hoc direct consumer distribution methods are going to face temperature challenges, how some of the logistics will change as it gets warmer.
Yeah, and I see, Simca, your question about H-2A visas for returning workers. It's an interesting challenge brought up on this Vermont call yesterday that it seems like there are workers who are starting to enter enter the States despite the challenges with immigration and testing and all. One of the concerns that I heard is that some producers don't want to hire temporary labor because one of the conditions of H-2A workers is they're not taking positions away from other US citizen laborers. So there's a concern that if they fill in with temporary labor, that they wouldn't be able to then bring on the H-2A workers. This is a US Department of Labor regulation in Vermont with the dairy and some of the other production farms. That's been raised as a concern. If workers go out that are sick and they bring on temporary and then H-2A workers are scheduled to come in, it's a concern. So I don't know if there's any effort to seek a waiver from Department of Labor on that issue, but that's one data point that I've heard. See, the American Farmland Trust has a call coming up on new programs to address COVID-19's impacts. So there's a link in the chat there. Thank you. And Future Harvest Farmer to Farmer call on COVID-19 response. I can't tell from the link what date that is. Okay, if you have, but I'm sure folks can click on those links and we can put that in the notes. And I'm sure I'm missing a number of comments here in my multitasking mode. So if others have things that they've written but would really like to bring out verbally, feel free to do so. Or if others of you see comments that you'd like to hear more about, feel free to call those out as well.
Peter, I think that in addition to taking notes on the call, we can also synthesize some of the chat conversations and include that in our outreach as well.
Right, and Margaret, you asked if, I think it was Margaret asked if we'll be making the recording available, which we certainly can do on our website. I guess in the last 5 minutes, I do want to make sure we provide a little bit of wrap up stuff that we wanted to know. So feel free to be in touch with us about other topics or roles that you think we and our partner groups can play. Please do use the spreadsheet. Let us know if it's working, if it's not working, if it needs sort of more human connectivity or matchmaking to address some of the issues that come up. And please feel free to share it as you think appropriate. Our listserv for campus dining and dining operators in general and other social media will have more information that we're getting, as well as our newsletter, the fine print, which you can sign up for. We also do have a survey that we put out just yesterday, and we've gotten some great input from it already. And that's linked on our website and the link that Hannah put at the beginning of the site. So it's like 5-minute survey to help capture other types of challenges or issues that you see need for more attention on. So we can put the spreadsheet back in. Tanya, Hannah, would you do that? There's a request for one more time. Great. Any other final comments people want to speak to?
Hi, this is Julia. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for putting this together. This has been wonderful. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you all for participating and hanging in there. This is giving us a lot of really rich information that we can use to figure out how to share back out and think about channeling and putting our resources to work to help out in this challenging time. Oh, look at all the accolades coming in. This is the best part. All right, we will, we actually had agreed that we would leave the chat room open for a little bit if folks have any desire to hang on, so we will do that. But I think at this point we'll officially end the forum. And once again, thank you all for participating, and do please continue to stay in touch. Have a good rest of your afternoon.